It's kind of unsettling, how quickly the everyday can take a turn for the worse. 1 minute things seem normal, the next, well, it's life-altering. And we're all about unpacking those moments, digging into those situations where easy answers just don't exist. And today we're diving into a story about theft, a South African farm, and a community left reeling after a truly horrific event.
What gets me right off the bat is how this one incident becomes this prism, reflecting all these different perspectives, these layers of personal history and societal pressures, and frankly, assumptions we make based on limited information. It's way more than just a he said, she said situation.
Right. So to ground us a bit, let's start with what we know from the news reports. A 70-year-old farmer stands accused of running over a 6-year-old boy, Khwezi Beukes. And the reason given for this, allegedly, stealing oranges.
And it's that accusation that immediately makes you stop and think. Because the oranges Khwezi supposedly took, they were on the ground outside the farm's fence. That one detail, it just adds this whole other layer of complexity. Makes you question the motivations behind the alleged theft itself, and of course, the farmer's reaction.
Seriously, that detail sends chills down my spine. According to the report, the farmer, Christoffel Stoman, hit Khwezi with his vehicle. The boy suffered 2 broken legs. And it gets worse. The report also says Stoman hit the boy's mother, Magdalene Gentiges, with his vehicle as well.
Yeah, and the things Stoman is reported to have said afterward, they're deeply troubling. He apparently told the police he would do it again. If true, it paints a really disturbing picture of his mindset.
So we have this incident, and it's like ripples spreading outward. The actions themselves, the motivations, the lasting impact on everyone involved. I mean, where do we even begin to untangle all of this?
I think the first step has to be looking at each perspective involved really carefully and with a critical eye. Let's start with the farmer. What could possibly lead someone to such an extreme reaction? Was it fear? A sense of needing to protect what he believed was his, or something else entirely?
And then you have Khwezi's mother, Magdalene. To see that kind of violence directed at your child, the trauma, the fight for justice, the potential fear and power imbalances when reporting such a crime, it's hard to even fathom.
Absolutely. And then we have to consider the community at large. The article mentions existing tensions between locals and this farmer, Stoman. This incident, it becomes a flashpoint, laying bare these deep-seated social divisions that already existed.
This whole thing, it's like individual actions are crashing headfirst into these huge systemic issues.
You hit the nail on the head. And to really grasp how big that collision is, we got to look at South Africa's past. There's this long shadow of racial injustice, of economic inequality, especially when it comes to who owns the land. So this incident, whatever truly happened, is going to be seen through that lens, right? It becomes symbolic about something way bigger than itself.
It's like the article mentioned how locals had problems with Stoman before. We just get these little hints, these glimpses of past interactions, but it definitely adds to that sense of unease,
It does. And it reminds us to be careful not to jump to conclusions based on incomplete info. I mean, we know this event sparked outrage, protests. It reveals these really deep frustrations, these power imbalances that are just there under the surface. This isn't just some small town dispute. It's about wounds that run deep historically and in the present.
I can't help but think about all the what ifs, What if those oranges hadn't fallen outside the fence? What if Stoman had reacted differently? What if there was more communication, more understanding between the community and the farmers in that area?
Those what ifs, they stick with you, but they can also make you think, They force us to confront some uncomfortable truths about our own societies. Like, do we as a society put more value on property than on a child's well-being? How do we deal with the legacy of past injustices that still shape things today? These aren't easy questions, but they're questions we need to grapple with.
It's easy to get caught up in the shock of what happened, but you're right. There's this bigger conversation we have to have.
100%. And that conversation has to include the legal side of things. The prosecution, they're pushing for a strong case against Stoman, opposing bail, which tells me they think there's evidence this wasn't an accident, that there was intent. If that's the case, he could be looking at some serious charges.
Intentional or not, this has impacted everyone involved in a huge way. Little Khwezi, he's got a long road ahead of him, physically and emotionally. And the potential consequences for Stoman, they're big too, right? Legal ramifications, social isolation, not to mention public opinion, which can be its own beast entirely. It's like you said, these aren't just individuals operating in a vacuum. Their actions, their past, the systems they're a part of. It's all intertwined.
Yeah, it really underscores how interconnected everything is. You can't separate individual choices from the bigger picture, from the social context.
This whole deep dive, it's been heavy, no way around it, but it also makes you think, like, what can we take away from something like this? What can we learn from something so awful?
I think that's the question that really matters. This situation, as shocking as it is, it's not an isolated incident. It reveals these fault lines that exist in so many societies, these simmering tensions, prejudices, systems that just haven't caught up with the need for change.
And it's easy to feel overwhelmed, Like, how do you even begin to address something this big, this complex?
It starts with refusing to look away, admitting there's a problem, listening to the people most affected, and really trying to understand perspectives that might feel very different from our own. That's how we start to bridge those divides.
So it's about more than just reacting to the news then. It's about trying to create a different future, a better one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A future where things like this don't just get condemned after they happen, but where we're actively working to prevent them. And that takes real effort, cultivating empathy, dismantling the structures that perpetuate injustice, striving for a society where everyone feels safe and valued.
This deep dive, it's been a tough one. There's no denying that. But it's also a reminder that every news story, it involves real people, real lives, and these complex issues that we all grapple with.
It's a call to action, I think, a reminder that we all have a part to play in building that better future. And it begins with how we treat each other, how we deal with our shared history, and how we choose to move forward together.
You've given us a lot to consider today. And as always, we encourage you to keep digging, keep asking those tough questions, and keep the conversation going. This deep dive might be over, but that journey toward understanding, toward positive change, that's something we're all on together.
Turn the dial to the daily news. Turn the dial to the daily news. Turn the dial to the daily news. Bringing voices, headlines, and shoes. You turn the dial to the daily news.